Okay, guys, welcome to today's photography elements course. Um, Firstly, please make sure that you have your camera and your camera's user manual with you today. You will need this. I know the last few lessons we've been doing tasks that have been relating more to you understanding some of the skills when you're out and about with the camera. Today, we are actually going to be using that. So please make sure you've got a copy of that. So if you haven't, pause the video now, go and get that, and then start the video again when you come back. Okay, hopefully you've got your cameras now with you. What we're going to look at today is getting you in manual mode, all right? And using much more what are called these creative modes. Okay, your camera will have a lot of different settings at the back of it. You'll see some of them might have like pictures of a person, might have some mountains, might have little flower. This are all automatic settings. We don't want to use these. We want to use these more creative settings so that you have control over the camera and the camera doesn't have that control. Okay, so we're going to use these three today. The one that says TV, or on some of your cameras it will say S. One that says AV, or again on some of your cameras it will just say A, and the M mode. Okay, now the AV mode is what is called Aperture Priority. It could be down as an A on your camera, doesn't really matter. This is the amount of light that is let through your camera. Okay, so open up or look through your lens, there will be a hole in it which allows the amount of light that reaches the mirrors in your camera. You can adjust the size of that hole using the settings in your camera. Okay. TV or X is the shutter speed. So this camera within the body has a shutter. Okay. It opens and closes. Okay. The quicker it opens and closes, the less light that's going to be allowed in. Okay. If you open your shutter speed for a long period of time, it's going to let in more light. Okay. If you set it on M mode, this means that you are adjusting both of those settings. So if we go back to this, for example, in TV or S mode, you have control of the shutter speed and the camera controls everything else for you. In AV mode, you control the apertures, the amount of light that's let in through the size of the hole in your lens. Okay, and the camera controls everything else. In M mode, you control it all. All right, so we're not going to jump to M mode to start with. What we're going to talk about though is all of these are what controls exposure. Now, exposure is the amount that comes into your camera, and you can adjust it either by adjusting the aperture, as we've talked about. So that's the size, the diameter of the hole in your lens. You can adjust it by how long you open the shutter speed, or you can adjust it by altering the ISO, which is how sensitive your computer screen is, or your screen is within your camera. If we have a look at that in terms of some imagery, so our eyes, this is what we see in correct mode. So we want our camera to take an image of what our eyes see. However, if we have the settings set up incorrectly, sometimes our image will be too bright or overexposed, and sometimes it will be too dark. It will be underexposed. Okay, so it's important to kind of make sure we've got our settings correct on this. Again, we can end up with images like this. I'm sure you've all taken to the pictures where the person has been far too kind of bright, or you've taken landscape images where the image is far too dark. Okay, so again, we've tried to adjust. We need to adjust the settings so that the camera is taking an image of what our eyes see. If you're taking the picture indoors or at night, again, the exposure needs to be considered. So if I'm standing indoors and I take a picture outside, I will either just have a white box because it's so bright outside, and I will have the inside in the normal focus, or I'll be able to see outside and everything inside will be really dark. Okay, so again, exposure is something really, really important. It's a juggling act between those three variables, and it's those three variables we're going to learn about today. In your camera, you have a built-in light meter. Okay, this tells you whether your camera or the shot that you are going to take is in the good exposure, the correct one, or whether it is overexposed or underexposed. Now, in your camera somewhere, you will have something that looks like this. This is the meter. Okay, it might be a series of lines. Somewhere along those lines, there will be a negative sign. It might have numbers or it might not have numbers, and there will be a positive sign. Below this, there is a small, might be a little arrow, might be just be a little square like this. This moves up and down depending on whether your image is overexposed or underexposed. Okay, if you've got a DSLR, you'll find this on the top of your camera. However, for many of you, you will find this at the back of your camera, on the screen at the back. You'll also find this if you look through the viewfinder of your camera. Sometimes it's on the bottom, sometimes it's on the side here. Okay, ultimately, this is what I'm kind of looking for. I want to make sure that my camera is taking an image of what my eye sees so that the exposure is correct. Okay, so this little arrow is sitting right in the middle. If it's sitting too far to the plus, it means my image is going to be too bright. It's going to be overexposed. If it's sitting too far to the negative side, it means it's going to be too dark. Okay, it's going to be underexposed. Okay, so your first job now is to go and try and find your camera meter. Okay, have a play with the dials. So in order to do this, you'll need to set your camera to M mode. So look for it on the dial where you can set it to manual mode. Okay, try and find your meter and now start moving the dials and see of how you can move this little sort of widget underneath to the center here so that we get this balance correctly. Okay, have a play with that now, and then we'll move on to the next task.